Are you finding that your kids, I'm talking about specifically if your kids are in public education, I really can't speak to private education. If you're a homeschooler, don't click off. I'm sure this will still serve you. But one thing that I've been noticing more and more, specifically with my students who I tutor, who meet Shiloh, who the students who are tutor who are in public education, I'm noticing, and their parents are noticing, that the behavior is seeming to get worse and worse. And so I addressed this with one of my tutoring students the other day, and because I noticed that even with me, his behavior was starting to kind of go downhill. And I was trying to figure out, so I always try to figure out, like, what is the root cause of this? I fully believe that all behavior is some form of communication. So usually when kids are exhibiting some sort of unwanted, undesired behavior, there's a reason behind it. And if we can get to the root cause of it, then we can deal with it. So when the student who I was tutoring was really starting to misbehave, wasn't doing what I was asking, he started really to like push back and like push the boundaries. And so I just asked him, like, is part of the issue that, well, because he started to complain that he was tired. And I said, is part of the issue that when you're at school, you're having to like hold it in all day. And then by the time you get home, you just want to be able to let it out. And it's not a matter of like not following rules, but there is a structure within a classroom setting that when a child comes home, they're no longer in that structure anymore. And he said, yeah. So one way that I work with him is I give him choices, right? So if he's having a really hard time keeping his body under control and like sitting is just not an option for him, I give him a choice, right? Okay, you can sit or you can stand, but then I also set parameters with that. So for instance, you can sit or you can stand. However, you can't lie on the floor and you can't lie across the seat of the chair. So you can either sit correctly in the chair, doesn't mean he can't move, but you can either sit correctly in the chair or you can stand so you have a little more freedom to move your body. But I've heard this from other families where they're saying that their children are at school all day and then they come home and they just like go crazy. And I noticed this pattern start to happen when I was a teacher years ago. And what I saw in public education is that throughout the years, things just got worse. So I would imagine if things are continuing along the same trajectory that they were when I was a public school teacher, is that it is still continuing down that same trajectory, and that things in specifically early childhood classrooms are becoming less and less developmentally appropriate. So young children primarily learn through play. And what's happening is that in the classroom, play is being removed from the classroom, and assessment, like more assessments, more standardized testing, more worksheets, more workbooks, higher standards, all of this is beginning to happen. And so it is now creating a level of anxiety within our young children that they are not equipped to deal with. So because they are not equipped and mature enough to deal with everything that's being thrown at them, it's showing up in behavior issues. And then typically it gets diagnosed as something and then medication is thrown at them. So, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. But I wanted to give you as parents some tools um, that I use when I tutor just to make learning a little more fun. Now, you may not have any control. Well, you don't really have, like, if your child is in a classroom, if you are not educating your child at home, you really don't have control over what's happening. I'm also seeing a pattern of more and more teachers are not having the educational background. So when some of my students were getting ready, so I do kindergarten readiness at times with some of my students. So I have helped parents find schools for their students or, for their children. And with one family in particular, they really wanted to send their kids to kind of this like top-notch school. And I looked at the curriculum, I looked at, the website and kind of um, like the mission of the school. And then I looked at the backgrounds of the teachers. And I said, I understand that this is kind of like a top-notch school. However, none of the kindergarten teachers have a background in early childhood, which to me is deeply concerning. They don't even have a background in education, which again is deeply concerning. So I ended up looking at public schools in their neighborhood and looked at a variety of them, looked at specifically the kindergarten teachers, their biographies, their backgrounds, their education, because a lot of websites, like school websites, will nowadays have that. And so I presented a couple options and I said, but this one in particular, if they were my children, and I wasn't homeschooling, this is where I would send them. And I said the kindergarten teacher has a background like a master. I'm pretty sure she had a master's in early childhood. She had pictures of her classroom up. There were centers, just even like the way that her classroom was decorated looked fun. It looked engaging. It looked like it was truly geared towards kindergarten. And I said, this is where again, if it were me, this is where I would send my child. And the concern was, but the school as a whole didn't get a good grade. And I want to caution you against that because the truth is that you will find good teachers and bad teachers in every single school. Every single school. So where I started teaching and really where my heart was when I taught in public schools, I started teaching in a Title I school, high poverty. Um, the majority of my students came from very difficult home lives, and I'm pretty sure the school was an F-rated school for many years. But what I saw in that school, and again, there were some there were some not great teachers in that school. However, there were also exceptional teachers in that school. There were teachers that had, master's degrees in early childhood, and they came from like top-notch universities. I mean, I came from the University of Florida, which is a top-rated university for education. And so sometimes you find that really good teachers have a heart for working in poorly rated schools, just like in schools that might have better grades, which is just really grades on standardized testing. You're also going to find, a variety of teachers. Anyway, so I I presented this information to the family. The family decided to take my professional advice and sent their son to that school. He was at the top of his class in kindergarten. He loved learning, and it set such a solid foundation. He's now in third grade and still doing really well, still loves to learn. So the thing is, it's like if you can get the children loving to learn at a really young age, it sets such a solid foundation that will carry them for years to come. When your children come home with homework, most likely they're not going to want to do it, right? Because they've been at school all day. So I'm just going to share a few things that I have, a few things that I use, and where I get them for super cheap if price is an issue for you. You do not have to get everything at Lakeshore Learning. It's super expensive there. They have great stuff, but if you get things directly from a teacher store, you're going to pay more money. Obviously, you can buy things on Amazon. There's great things on Amazon too, but I sometimes just go to Dollar Tree and I have found amazing things at Dollar Tree. It's all about being creative. Now, there are some things for sure that I've gotten from Amazon, like sight word cards, and then on the back there's sentences. Um, I have had these erasers from Target for 4 years now, I think. And they were like 25 cent, like the whole thing, maybe not 25 cents, but like, I don't know, 50 cents, a dollar. I don't know. They're super cheap. They're probably not that cheap. They're probably not that cheap anymore. But I use these as just math manipulatives. So when the kids that I was tutoring were super young and we were working on classification, I would have them sort them by color, right? Now you can get different types of erasers and you can have them sort them by color, you can have them sort by shape, you can have them sort by size. I also use them just for math manipulatives as far as counting, one-to-one correspondence. I've used them for addition and subtraction. I've used them for multiplication. Same set of erasers, all kinds of things. Same thing with these counters. And these I got at Dollar Tree. Again, super cheap. You can use them for bingo. You can use them again for classification. You can just use them as math manipulatives. You could also use these for reading. So like let's say your student has a passage and you're working on sight words. You could say, okay, every time you see the word the, put a yellow counter on it. Every time you see the word and, put a red counter on it. I don't know, sometimes ideas just come to me, but so I use those. And then these I got on Amazon. These are just word cards. I don't love all of the word cards because some of them I'm like, those are just not words that kids would even know. But for instance, this one, fish, right? So they're practicing, I don't think you can see, they're practicing reading the word. And then they also come with great wooden letters. And as they graduate past the cards, I put the cards to the side. I still use the wooden letters. You can also use the wooden letters for like letter sorts, put all of the A's in a group, put all of the B's in a group, so on and so forth. And then another thing I've gotten at Dollar Tree, just a deck of cards. And I've used this for a variety. I can't even remember all of the things I've used the deck of cards for. But one thing I most recently used the deck of cards for was, so I took out all of the jacks, queens, kings, and aces. So all I had was, 2 to 10. And then I spread them out and I had the kids choose two cards. So 5 and 8. So you have options. You can have them practice addition. You can have them practice subtraction. You can have them practice number families. You can have them practice, okay, 8 plus or 8 minus what number equals 5? 5 plus what number equals 8? All from a deck of cards. And then the most recent find that I found at Dollar Tree, which was perfect for me because I don't need a whole class set, was hundreds block, tens rods, and ones. So again, when I was tutoring the other day, we were working on subtraction, double-digit numbers, subtracting single-digit numbers, and then, but without any regrouping. So I would have him, let's say, make the number 38, right? So he would pull out 3 of the tens rods, 8 of the ones cubes, and then, okay, 38 minus 5. So then he would obviously take away 5 of the ones and then work on, and then write down the answer. So I still had a worksheet, but I paired the worksheet with some sort of hands-on manipulative. And so it was more engaging for him. So if you find that your children are struggling with the homework just because they don't want to do it and it's more worksheets and whatnot, then bring in some sort of hands-on manipulative, hands-on activity that that just kind of helps break up the monotony a little bit. And then this is, I haven't actually used this yet, but this is something else that I got from Dollar Tree. And my idea for this when I got it was to put different word families on here, right? So then they roll it. Let's say they roll on the at family, and then you could even pull out the wooden letters, right? Okay, build all of the words that you can think of that are in the at family. And then they roll it again. Okay, great. You got the ig family. Okay, create as many words as possible in the ig family. So those are just some of the many ideas that I have. But I hope that helps. And I just want to share the last thing. I was having a conversation with a woman who I work with who is homeschooling her child this year. And she had originally purchased a curriculum that was like a computer-based curriculum. And she was realizing that even though her child had had experience with the computer in some capacity, but specifically with this curriculum, it was too much. And as we were having the conversation, I said, well, it sounds like it just isn't developmentally appropriate for her, you know? I mean, really, like I said, kids learn through play. Young children in particular, they really shouldn't be spending hours a day on a screen when their brains are still developing. So we were kind of talking through that. And I said, I think one thing that a lot of parents don't necessarily understand is, and teachers too, is that you have to look at what is the skill that you're assessing. So it's the same thing with standardized tests. But with this mother whose daughter was on the computer and her daughter was getting frustrated, it's like, what is the skill being assessed? Is the skill being assessed whatever the skill was that her daughter was working on, or is it computer proficiency? Because if her daughter isn't proficient on the computer, then that's ultimately the skill that's being tested. She can't even get to the skill that's actually being assessed until she works through the fact that she's not proficient on the computer. It's the same thing with standardized tests. So there were so many times where, let's say I was reading a math problem and I had a student who was kind of like, off in la la land, and then they come back, they haven't heard the question, and now they're just guessing because they haven't heard it, right? Okay, now it no longer is a math assessment, but it's actually now a listening assessment. Same thing when you have children who aren't strong readers and they're expected to independently read a math problem, like a word problem. Okay, well, what is the skill that is being assessed? Because if they aren't solid readers and therefore they can't read the problem, or maybe they read it really slowly, but then because they've read it really slowly, they struggle to comprehend what it's even asking. And then let's say they guess, because at that point they're frustrated. You're no longer assessing the math skill, and you're now assessing the reading and the comprehension skill. So this is one thing of many things, but this is one thing that I'm really passionate about. And it's why I I want to really come alongside parents and help parents, whether you are homeschooling your kids or whether you are sending your kids to school, to public school, private school, whatever it may be. I want you to have this level of understanding because it's going to empower you to be able to advocate for your kids. And I think it's really important that as you are empowered to educate your children and to lead your children, um, as the spiritual leaders in your home, it's also important to know some of these things so that you know how to ask the appropriate questions. One thing that I've really loved with the families that I've worked with is just by these simple little ways of educating them, they feel empowered to then go to the teacher and ask questions. And I think it's important to go to the teacher and ask questions. Now, some things may not be able to change, but some things may. And yeah. If you would like more of this and you are not subscribed to this channel, please make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. If you would like more information on what I do work out of the Phoenix area. You can go to faithfulfoundation.co. If you would like resources for your family, go to faithfulfoundation.co, and there's a link at the top that says products. You can go there. And if you want to learn more about how to lead your home and develop a Christ-centered home, listen to the podcast, Early Childhood and the Bible. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you soon.